Pittsburgh Steelers take on the Green Bay Packers in Pittsburgh on Sunday Night Football this week, and Aaron Rodgers is looking for revenge versus the team that replaced him. Welcome into the Steelers Talk preview here in Week 8. We're going to be going live for this game. Sunday Night Football, of course, the Steelers will be wearing their alternate uniforms versus the Cheeseheads. Our live watch party here on this channel will be starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Over an hour of pregame coverage followed by live play-by-play and live analysis of the game itself, followed by post-game analysis as well. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already to never miss any of our videos here on Steelers Talk. We do weekly previews like this every single week, and then also we go live for every single Steelers game. We have the largest Steelers watch parties anywhere on the YouTube platform, so make sure you guys click that subscribe button for extensive Steelers coverage all throughout the 2025 season. So let's break this one down, man. Two teams over 500. Two teams that are expected to be in the playoffs this year. Packers versus Steelers at Acrisure Stadium. Of course, the Steelers will be wearing their alternate uniforms. But, you know, something to kind of keep in mind heading into this game, guys. I know the Steelers are coming off a tough loss on Thursday Night Football on the road versus the Cincinnati Bengals. But after a Thursday Night Football loss, Mike Tomlin has actually been very good about coming back from that Thursday night loss and getting wins. A 7-2 record under the Mike Tomlin era, coming off a Thursday Night Football loss. So usually the way it works with Mike Tomlin, guys, is that you give him more time to prepare, and he has a very good record. Just look at his bye week. Games coming off of a bye week. He's got, a fantastic record with that. Same thing goes for the week after Thursday Night Football. Great coaches, they usually take advantage of that extra preparation time, and Mike Tomlin has certainly had that track record throughout his coaching career here in Pittsburgh. But really, guys, the big story in this football game is Aaron Rodgers versus his old team in the Green Bay Packers. He is going to really retire, known for what he did with the Green Bay Packer franchise. He won a Super Bowl with them against the Pittsburgh Steelers, kind of ironically. And, of course, now he's going to be playing his former team, his former head coach in Matt LaFleur, and he's going to be playing the quarterback in Jordan Love that replaced him. So you better believe that A-Rod is going to want to beat his replacement. In this kind of matchup between the master versus apprentice, you better believe, maybe the only game he's ever going to play versus Jordan Love in his entire NFL career, he wants to be the one that comes out on top in this ball game. And like I mentioned, guys, the Pittsburgh Steelers will be debuting what I like to call the rugby throwbacks. Very interesting look with the tan pants. I really like the helmets. The helmets are absolutely sweet, but it's maybe I like it a little bit more when I see them in person. When I see this shot here, this edit of Rodgers, I actually think Rodgers looks better than maybe I would have thought that he looked. Now, obviously, it's going to look different in person versus something that's Photoshopped, but definitely going to be an interesting look for the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday night. Now, some injuries to watch in this ball game. Calvin Austin III, the wide receiver, is expected to return from his shoulder injury, but Mike Tomlin said that the participation and the quality of that participation in practice this week is going to determine whether or not he's going to be able to give it a go. And then a number of injuries to watch for the Green Bay Packers. Starting defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt as well as defensive end Lucas Van Ness are dealing with injuries. I would say Van Ness is probably doubtful at this point, but we'll see. Christian Watson could be coming off of IR this week, and then Dontavian Wicks dealt with a calf injury last week in Arizona, and then Brandon McManus, their kicker, has been out with a quad injury. We'll keep you guys updated on the injury statuses of these guys as the week goes on. But still to come here on the Steelers Talk Preview, we're going to be going over Green Bay's scheme and roster breakdown. We're going to be talking about the team trends comparison, breaking down the matchups between Green Bay's offense versus Pittsburgh's defense and vice versa. We'll get into our scouting report on Packers quarterback Jordan Love. We'll go over my keys to victory, and then, of course, my official Week 8 score prediction for Steelers versus Packers. But before we get into the rest of this week's preview, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Mando Whole Body Deodorant. Fall is officially here, and that means a couple of things, guys. Crisp air, football, maybe a bonfire or two, but if you're like most guys, you're still putting in a lot of hard work. And yeah, that means sweat. Don't let body odor sideline you. Mando Deodorant plus Sweat Control is for real working guys. Formulated to stop odor before it starts and doesn't mask odor with overwhelming fragrance, so you can tackle anything from the job site to tailgating with confidence. This isn't your typical deodorant, guys. It's clinical strength, 2 times better at controlling sweat than the standard deodorant. It controls both sweat and odor for 72 hours. And just after 12 hours, underarm sweat was reduced by 92%. This stuff really does work, guys, which is why I use Mando every single day. I really like their Cedar Grove scent here. I actually have their bourbon leather scented body wash as well at home. I have a bunch of Mando products, guys, because it actually works. It helps me stay fresh throughout the day. It helps me keep dry as well. And if you guys want to try out Mando today, you guys can try out their starter pack. And the reason why the starter pack is perfect for new customers, guys, is because it comes with a solid stick of deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice. Like you can try out their mini body wash, but you could also try something like deodorant wipes, which are highly recommended as well. Plus, you get free shipping, so there's no reason not to try out Mando for yourselves today. As a special offer for our listeners, new customers get 20% off site-wide with our exclusive code. Just use code CHAT at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide, plus you get free shipping. That's shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. Mando's got you covered with deodorant plus sweat control. So say goodbye to sweat stains and hello to long-lasting freshness with our friends at Mando Whole Body Deodorant today. So taking a look here at the coaching breakdown and scheme breakdown for the Green Bay Packers. Of course, Matt LaFleur is their longtime head coach here in Green Bay. One of the best win percentages out of any head coach in the league because he inherited Aaron Rodgers when he got there. And, of course, you're winning a bunch of ball games with Rodgers, winning multiple MVPs in his offense. And then you get Jordan Love immediately after that, and he's been pretty solid as his starting quarterback as well. But he's one of the best offensive play callers in the league. He runs a Shanahan-style West Coast offense. And then on defense, Jeff Hafley has been one of the kind of brighter names, kind of the exciting young names in the defensive space in football. Runs a 4-2 split safety defense. They base out of nickel. They play a lot of 2 high safety coverages, so expect that from the Green Bay Packers this week. And then the results for this team so far this year, they beat the Detroit Lions. They beat the Washington Commanders there in week 2 pretty convincingly, but then they lost to the Browns 13-10, a very disappointing performance for the Packer offense in that one. Then you have a very disappointing tie at the end of that primetime game versus the Dallas Cowboys, and then you were able to win 2 games in a row here against Cincinnati and Joe Flacco just days after he was traded to Cincinnati, and then you beat the Arizona Cardinals and Jacoby Brissett, but they kind of let that Cardinal team kind of stick with them there, so maybe underperforming a little bit over the last few weeks. But you take a look here at the roster breakdown for the Green Bay Packers offense. They've got Jordan Love as their starting quarterback, Rasheed Walker is their starting left tackle. I would say the interior of their offensive line is a little bit weaker. Aaron Banks, Angleton Jenkins, and Jordan Morgan are a little bit shaky. We'll talk about them later in today's show, but Zach Tom, their right tackle, one of the better right tackles in all of football. Their starting receiver trio, we could see Christian Watson in this one, but I would expect to see Romeo Doubs, Matthew Golden, and Dontavian Wicks the most out there. Of course, Jaden Reed is out with a major injury right now. And then you got Tucker Kraft, who is a really good tight end. You definitely got to account for Kraft in the passing game. And then Josh Jacobs is their excellent number 1 running back. You got to make sure that you don't let Jacobs ruin this game. But you guys can take a look at where Green Bay's offense ranks in all the major categories that you look at here. And this is a bona fide top 10 offense. You can make an argument it's a top 5 offense in the league. They don't give the football away. They're very efficient. Now, the yards per game, yards per play, not as high as some of these other metrics, but they play very good, situational football. They move the chains. They do all these different things. They score in the red zone, and they don't give the football away. So, definitely a top 10 offense in the league that you're going to be going up against this week, and arguably the best offense that the Steelers have faced all season long, maybe with the one exception being New England. But honestly, I would probably say the Packers have even New England beat, and then Seattle, of course, is a pretty good offense. But this one's right up there with the best ones the Steelers are going to see all season long. And you guys can take a look here at the Green Bay Packers offense versus the Pittsburgh Steelers defense and where they rank in points per game, yards per play, third down, red zone, and then turnovers. This is certainly going to be a battle between a Steelers defense that turns the ball over and a Green Bay Packers offense that's done a really good job protecting the football. Also, it's a good matchup between the Packers offense, which scores a lot in the red zone, and the Steelers defense. It's actually done a pretty darn good job in the red zone. But, I think in the efficiency numbers, the Packers certainly have the Steelers beat. So the Steelers are going to have to step up in a major way, maybe make a couple of schematic adjustments to some of the stuff we've been seeing from the Steelers defense as of late. And you guys can take a look at kind of the efficiency numbers here in terms of the advanced analytics, and you guys can see that the Packers definitely outweigh the Steelers defense, at least to this point in the season. Bona fide top 5 offense in these kind of categories, talking about EPA and success rate, whereas the Steelers have really struggled in these kind of advanced analytic type of areas. And you look at the points per game trends, the Green Bay Packers are scoring 26.3 points per game. The Steelers are giving up 23.3. You average that out, that's around 24 points that the trends would predict for the Green Bay Packers in this Week 8 matchup. And, now we can shift over to the defensive side of the ball for Green Bay. And listen, man, if they play their normal defense where they kind of come out in nickel all the time and they play with 2 deep safeties, I think they're going to get gashed versus the Pittsburgh Steelers jumbo personnel look. So I think Green Bay, they're going to be at a little bit of a disadvantage in this game because they're going to have to play bigger this week, all right? They're going to have to play an extra linebacker. They're going to have to play with an extra guy in the box when they're used to playing lighter, faster, and with 2 high safeties. So, I think that, this is kind of the reason why the Steelers wanted to go heavy personnel this year and have that be their offensive vision, is because they wanted these split safety type teams to be very uncomfortable and kind of play a style of defense that they're not really used to running versus, teams that they play on a weekly basis in the National Football League. So that will be an advantage for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I would say the problem for Pittsburgh is that they definitely have the bodies to adjust. Now, we'll see if Devontae Wyatt and Lucas Van Ness can play. If they can, I think they certainly have the bodies to be able to, play a little bit heavier, stop the run versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, match their kind of jumbo personnel packages because, Micah Parsons is an absolute game wrecker, man. He's absolutely fantastic. But you also have Rashawn Gary on the other side of him at the edge, and you got Lucas Van Ness, if he plays, as a really good number 3 edge rusher as well. Devontae Wyatt has played phenomenally when he's been on the field. They've got some good depth at the defensive tackle position as well. So, they're certainly set there if Wyatt and Van Ness can play this week. And then at the off-ball linebacker position, if they want to play a true 4-3 and put an extra linebacker on there, Isaiah McDuffie has been a pretty darn good rotational third linebacker for them, and that's already including Edgerrin Cooper and Quay Walker, who have been playing really good as their starters this year in this Green Bay defense. Then you take a look at their secondary. This secondary struggled a little bit over the last few weeks. Keyshawn Nixon had a really fast start to the year. He struggled a little bit as of late, though. Nate Hobbs is a free agent signing that they signed this year. He's playing on the outside, and then they run kind of like a 3 safety kind of package here in terms of their nickel looks, which is most of the time. Xavier McKinney is their number 1 safety. Javon Bullard is their number 2 safety, and when they're in nickel, he will play in the slot. And then Evan Williams has actually played very well as their kind of third safety type of player. He plays deep when they're in their nickel look. So I would say their safety room is really, really good. Their outside corners, though, are probably the vulnerability in this Packers defensive roster. Now we can take a look at Green Bay's defensive rankings, and it's not quite as good as the offense, especially on third down and in the red zone and in those kind of situational moments. But they don't give up a lot of yards. They don't give up a lot of efficiency in that way. I would say, maybe borderline top 10 defense, but they don't take the ball away all that often, which should allow the Pittsburgh Steelers to hold on to the football. That is, if you don't have just crazy stuff happen throughout this week. Then you take a look at the matchup here between the Steelers offense versus the Green Bay Packers defense. And the Steelers are actually performing pretty darn well in these categories here. And, I think that the Steelers should be able to, move the football pretty effectively, at least based on the trends to this point. You guys can take a look here at the matchup in the advanced stats between the Steelers and Packers here on this side of the football. And you guys can see that the Steelers should be fairly competitive. Even though they do have Micah Parsons and they do have some talent here in Green Bay, the trends would predict that the Steelers are going to be pretty darn competitive in this football game here. And then you take a look at the points per game trends for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're giving up the Steelers are getting 25 points per game, and the Packers defense is giving up 21 points, which would predict 23 points scored for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this Sunday Night Football matchup. And of course, if you've been keeping track of those trends, you would know that the Packers are predicted to win this game by the trends by just 1 point, 24-23. But the thing that you should know about these trends is that the margin of error is usually within 3 points, right? So this game is definitely expected to be within the margin of error and expected to, definitely have an opportunity for the Pittsburgh Steelers to get a win versus a very good football team here in the Green Bay Packers. Now, before I get into my keys to victory versus Green Bay this week, click that thumbs up icon if you enjoy our weekly previews, our in-depth kind of stat analysis, all that great stuff. We really put in a lot of work to make these previews as in-depth and as extensive as possible. So if you guys appreciate the work that we do here on Steelers Talk, click that thumbs up icon to help us out. All right, this week I've got a whopping 10 keys to victory for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The first one is to force mistakes out of Jordan Love. Okay, because I think Jordan, if he's put under pressure and he's put in situations where, he gets a little bit desperate, he can put the ball in harm's way. Even though a lot of those turnover-worthy plays that he's had this year haven't been converted into turnovers, I do think he can be a little bit vulnerable to putting the ball in harm's way. He's had a very good start to the season, almost 70% completion percentage. He's got over 1,400 yards, which is that's a really good pace at this point in the year. He's got 10 touchdowns, it's just 2 picks. The stat line right there, just the baseline stats are pretty darn good. But also when you look at the advanced numbers for Jordan Love this year, he's probably a top 10 quarterback right now in terms of the advanced analytics. But there are some areas where he does struggle, right? He's only 23rd in turnover-worthy play percentage at 3.2% of his passes. All right, he also holds the ball for quite a long time. He's 27th in that regard. That should help out the Steelers' pass rush from getting home a bit more this week if he's holding on to the football. And also his average depth of target there, is a little bit lower than what it's been in years past for him. So you got to keep that in mind going into this game. But man, you look at the adjusted EPA per play, the efficiency that he plays with in this offense, it's definitely top 10 in the National Football League right now. And you take a look at his scouting report, I think he's got excellent size, and obviously he's got the arm talent, the playmaking instincts out of structure. He can certainly make Matt LaFleur right even when he's wrong, and he is a pretty decent mental processor. He doesn't get enough credit for that, in my opinion. He finds the open receiver very, very often. There's a reason why he's completing 70% of his passes in this offense, but some of the cons, he throws off his back foot a lot, which leads to some accuracy issues. He bounces in the pocket, so his pocket footwork is not for me, man. It's just not. It never has been, and I'm not sure if he's ever going to fix it, but I think that's just a part of Jordan Love's game at this point. He makes untimely mistakes, especially like in clutch moments. He almost lost the game versus the Dallas Cowboys there because it was winding down to like 1 second. He threw it out the back of the end zone with barely any time left on the clock. Just a really dumb mistake. And also he holds the ball for too long at times. So if you have a good pass rush, you can get in the face of Jordan Love. And I think that the two weaknesses that the Pittsburgh Steelers need to exploit when it comes to Love's game is, number one, he's going to hold the ball, so get after him, all right? TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, all right? Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, you got to get to the quarterback this week to affect the passing game. And then number two, especially if you put that pass rush on him, he's going to put the ball in harm's way from time to time. The Steelers have had 0 turnovers over the last 2 weeks, but they've had a number of opportunities. Like if they would have executed on every single one of their legitimate opportunities to get an interception over the last 2 weeks, they might have had 4 or 5 turnovers over the last 2 weeks, but they've dropped a lot of picks. They've had a lot of missed opportunities. This week, in a highly closely contested matchup is what I'm expecting here. Those turnovers could be the difference between winning and losing, so you got to capitalize this week. Then you got to put interior pressure on Jordan Love, and I think Cam Hayward in particular is the guy that I'm going to be watching out for specifically to win his matchup versus Aaron Banks on this Packers offensive line. You guys can take a look at this offensive line and where they rank according to Pro Football Focus rankings. And, Rasheed Walker, pretty good, around league average. And then you got Zach Tom on the other side there, 15th in the league. It's pretty darn good. But on the interior, nobody ranks within the top half of their given position right now. And, I think that is the area that the Steelers need to exploit. And the Steelers have talent on the interior of the defensive line. Cam Hayward, you got Derek Harmon, you got Keanu Benson, all right? You got guys that can get after the quarterback here in Pittsburgh, and I am expecting Cam Hayward to be able to come out here and play a really good game for the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially going up against Aaron Banks, who I think is just pretty darn brutal. His tape has not looked great to start this season. So Captain Cam, he wanted those incentives going into the year. He actually had a really good game against Cincinnati, getting some pressures on Joe Flacco. But this week he's got to get him on the ground, all right? So I think Cam Hayward is the guy that I'm really looking at to really hopefully take over this ball game on the interior of the defensive line. And then the Steelers, I think a big thing and a big emphasis this week for their defense is going to be to plug up the run. There's been multiple, people in the Steelers building, Mike Tomlin, Patrick Queen, and others talking about how the run game was really the big bugaboo and the thing that really grinds the gears of the people in the Steelers locker room. Because Cincinnati, went into last week's game like dead last in rushing. So the fact that they got as many rushing yards as they did, it's really eaten at this Steelers team. You better believe they're going to be motivated to stop Josh Jacobs. Now, that's going to be easier said than done. Jacobs is going to be one of the tougher running back tests that they play all season long. Matt LaFleur knows how to scheme up the run game as well, and Jacobs is a tough test. So I hope the Steelers in their front comes ready to play. They're going to have to be to go up against this Josh Jacobs-led team. He's one of the premier running backs in the league. So if the Steelers are going to win, Josh Jacobs can't be allowed to take over this game. And then also another thing that I would say for the Steelers defense is to not get fooled, all right? Matt LaFleur, one of the more creative offensive play callers in the National Football League, and what he's really good at in particular, in my opinion, guys, is setting up his tight ends up for success, all right? So like Tucker Kraft, like the amount of times that he just schemes him wide open is just incredible. So you got to know where all these guys are and all these bluff blocks and all these different things that they do in the play action game. Like Matt LaFleur is going to try and get in his bag in this game against the Steelers defense. It's going to be important that the communication issues aren't a thing this week. It's going to be important for everyone to be on the same page when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers on the defensive side of the ball. But now we can shift over to the offensive side of the ball for Pittsburgh, where I think, you got to keep the run game rolling. All right, this is the identity of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense as it stands right now. These jumbo personnel looks and then running the football off of those jumbo personnel looks. And since week 4, since the Steelers implemented these jumbo 12 and 13 personnel packages, right now they're 3rd in the league in EPA per rush, and right now they're 5th in rushing success rate. Okay, so they're doing a really good job running the football. They are a top 5 rushing offense in the league since they've made that crucial adjustment to put Spencer Anderson on the field as a tight end. And I expect that to continue to be the case this week. Jaylen Warren continues to show why he's one of the best running backs in the league. This offensive line is getting better and more cohesive as the weeks go on. So that's got to be the identity in this football game if the Steelers are going to win. But that doesn't mean that Raji shouldn't keep rocking, because he absolutely should. Aaron Rodgers, man, he looked as good versus Cincinnati as I've seen him play in many seasons at this point. Probably, since at least 2022, but maybe even 2021. His feet were so quick in the pocket. His pocket presence was elite. He was throwing the ball down the field with precision. His smarts were really coming out. He was throwing the ball down the field a lot more versus Cincinnati. And just in general, I think Aaron Rodgers has played a pretty darn good season. You guys can take a look at his advanced numbers, and there's certain things, that he's a little bit lower on, especially in the turnover-worthy play percentage department. PFF currently has him ranked 28th. With 3.6% of his passes being deemed turnover-worthy. That's a bit high for his career, but I'm not too worried about that at this point. Of course, he's not throwing the ball down the field a ton on average. He's 3rd lowest in the National Football League right now in that particular category. But right now, he's 13th in adjusted EPA per play. He's 8th in completion percentage over expected. So he's somebody that's, throwing accurate footballs. He's, around league average in yards per attempt. So he's playing smart, efficient football, and the results speak for themselves. I mean, he's doing a really good job right now, and last week was one of his better performances that I've seen in a while. Now, you might be saying at home, but Jack, he threw 2 picks, and one of those was a really bad pick. But the other one, I don't really put on Aaron Rodgers. I think that was just a great play by DJ Turner, the Bengals corner. And, if Rodgers plays the way that he did versus Cincinnati, and he's ad-libbing the way that he was, if he's moving in the pocket as well as he was, if he's throwing, those seam balls to Pat Freiermuth as well as he was, and he's just playing good, smart, efficient football, the Steelers are going to have a hell of a chance to win this game versus the Packers. But then, the thing that the Steelers can't do on offense is let Micah Parsons kill them. All right, and you better believe he's going to be lining up against Broderick Jones this week. Now, I do think the Steelers are going to try and give Broderick as much help as possible, just like they did versus Myles Garrett. And what they did against Myles is that they would put Spencer Anderson on him in a true double team at times, and then they would also put Darnell Washington in there to help Broderick Jones as well. So I think they had a really good plan to account for Myles Garrett 2 weeks ago. Of course, Garrett was pretty much invisible in that football game. And part of that plan is also to get the ball out quickly. All right, and Aaron Rodgers has done this extremely well over the course of this season, where he's getting the ball out fast. He's getting the ball to his playmakers in space. And I think that needs to, once again, be the plan for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Play efficiently. Get those 4, 5, 6-yard chunks in the passing game. Continue to move the chains and move the line of scrimmage in the run game. Wear out an opposing defense. Stay on the field. Do all those things. And, of course, execute in the red zone. The Steelers have done those things extremely well to this point in the season on offense. And I hope, at least, that those trends continue here on Sunday Night Football. But then some general keys to victory for the Steelers. Play the cleaner game, all right? The games that they have lost, they haven't played the cleaner game, all right? They've made really crucial mistakes in those 2 games, and, penalties have been a big issue for the Steelers the last 2 games after really doing a good job limiting penalties the first few weeks of the season. So you got to clean those up. You've lost the turnover ratio on the 2 games that you've lost, so you got to, limit those turnovers and try to win the turnover battle. But then I do expect this one to be close late, guys, which means you got to make the play when it comes to, the fourth quarter. And, the Steelers, when they've made the play late, of course, they've won those football games. When they've given up the play to the other team, they have lost those close football games. So, I'm looking at this particular matchup, and I think it's going to be close. It's going to come down to the wire, all these different things. But I just have a feeling, all right, that this is a game that Aaron Rodgers is going to be extremely motivated in. I don't think it's going to be a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the Steelers' defense will play better than what we've seen from them over the last few weeks. And I think the Steelers' offense will be good enough to get a very close victory in this one. I'm going to go 24-23. Steelers win at home on Sunday Night Football to take one away from the Packers, a team that many people expect to be a Super Bowl contender this year and to improve to 5-2. And I'm hoping that by the end of this week, we're looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers as a team that can really make some noise in the AFC this year. So it's your turn. Let me know down there in the comments section. Predict the score of Steelers versus Packers this week. I'm going 24-23. Steelers win, and Raji gets his revenge over the Packers. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. And that'll conclude this week's preview here on Steelers Talk. We do these in-depth previews every single week on the channel. We're also going to give you guys extensive injury updates on this game as the week goes on, and we'll be live for our live watch party on Sunday night starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Over an hour pregame coverage, live play-by-play and game analysis, followed by extensive postgame coverage as well. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already to join the largest Steelers news program anywhere here on YouTube.